Tantor Audio, a division of Recorded Books, presents The Fox by Hildie Mcqueen, narrated by Mhairi Morrison. A note from the author. In 1560, Scotland formally declared its split with the Catholic Church. John Knox, the leader of the Presbyterian movement, banned the celebration of Christmas in Scotland from 1580 until about 1640. Therefore, Clan Ross will be celebrating Hogmanay, a celebration of the New Year, which consisted of days of games, gifts and feasting. One of the main traditions was first footing, where a dark-haired man stepped over the threshold with shortbread, coal, black bun and a wee dram of whisky. In British and Manx folklore, the first foot is the first person to enter the home of a household on New Year's Day and is seen as a bringer of good fortune for the coming year. Clan Ross of the Hebrides. This fictional story takes place at the beginning of the 17th century in the Scottish Hebrides, Isles off the Isle of Skye's western coasts. In the 1500s, lordship over the Hebrides collapsed and the power was given to clan chiefs. The Macneil in Barra, the MacDonald, Clan Ranald, in South Uist, the Uisden in North Uist, and the MacLeod, the Isles of Harris and Lewis. For this series, I have moved the clans around a bit to help the story work better. The clans' locations in my books are as follows. The Macneil will remain in Barra. The MacDonald, Clan Ranald, is moved to North Uist. The Uisden resides in Benbecula, and the MacLeod remains in the Isles of Harris and Lewis. My fictional clan, Clan Ross, will laird over South Uist. Prologue. Ross Keep, South Uist, Hebrides, Scotland, 1603. Interesting that suddenly all my brothers are settling down, Caelan told his stepmother, Lady Mhairi. I will not fall into such a trap. His stepmother chuckled. I assure you, it is not a trap. I hope that when you finally fall in love, it will not feel like one. They sat in the parlour at Keep Ross. He'd arrived that evening, as his stepmother had asked him to take her to visit his half-brother, Stuart, and Stuart's wife, Cat, who lived on the west side of the isle, in a place called Caelan Days. His eldest half-brother and laird, Darach, would not leave the keep until his wife, Isabel, was fully recovered from childbirth. His other half-brothers also could not leave their duties. Ewan was busy preparing his lands for winter. Gideon had travelled to the southern guard post, and Duncan's wife, Beatrice, was about to give birth. That left him to help with what needed to be done when it came to his stepmother. He didn't begrudge having to travel. In actuality, he looked forward to seeing his half-brother and visiting the village now that it was fully rebuilt. Although he'd never admit it to them, he missed Stuart terribly, and his cousin Artair, who remained at Caelan Days, and he looked forward to spending time with them. When do you wish to leave? Caelan asked, drinking the last of the tea in his cup. Early in the morning? That would be perfect, his stepmother replied, eyes bright with excitement. Oh, did I mention we have another person travelling with us? Caelan let out a breath. No, ye had not. Who? Just then a young woman walked in. Her clear green gaze barely hesitated on him before she looked to his stepmother and smiled widely. "I am sorry, Aunt. I did not know you had company." "Nonsense," Lady Mariel said, motioning to Caelan. "This is my stepson, Caelan. He is to take us to visit Stuart and Cat." "Oh," the woman looked back to him. "I do not believe we have met." His stepmother placed a hand on his forearm. "I do not suppose ye have. When Glynis visited last, ye were gone to the lowlands." At the words, the woman studied him. "Ah, yes. Now I remember. Ye are the brother who is more English than Scot." The words made Caelan want to glare at her. Instead, he gave her a bland smile. "Is it more Scottish than English to state things one knows nothing of upon meeting someone for the first time?" Her eyes widened, and she glanced to his stepmother. "I do not know why I said that. Father always says I have the worst habit of blurting things without thought." She looked back to Caelan. "Please forgive me." When she lowered her gaze, Caelan studied her. Whoever she was, she had to be the most enticing woman he'd ever laid eyes on. Her plump lips begging for a lingering kiss. Her round curves, an invitation to pleasure. Her breasts. "Caelan?" His stepmother gave him a curious look. "Accept Glynis's apology." His lips curved. "Of course. It is forgotten." Satisfied, his stepmother smiled. "Glynis is my niece, and is visiting from Barra." "Ah, a Macneil," Caelan said, as Glynis lowered to sit. "You say it as if you do not care for my clan," Glynis replied. Caelan did not reply because, if he were to be honest, there was one Macneil he definitely did not care for. A young man at his school in Glasgow that he'd never gotten along with, but it was not something that mattered any longer. "We leave early in the morning." He stood and walked from the room, unwilling to look and see how the woman was probably assessing his choice of clothing. He was well aware he dressed much more English than Scottish. Chapter 1. Mounted on his huge war-horse, Caelan and several guards surrounded the carriage that his stepmother, her companion Anna, and Glynis Macneil travelled in. Feminine voices and laughter floated from the carriage, making the guards who rode alongside turn a time or two toward it. Interesting how the presence of the fairer sex made the men sit straighter in the saddle and be more alert than usual to ensure their safety. Not to say that the men were not always doing their best, but even he would never allow any harm to come to the women. His conversation with his stepmother the day prior came to mind. He'd not sought to court a woman before. It wasn't that he was against marriage, but more that he'd never met someone who he could see himself tied to for life. There was also the fact that he was born out of wedlock. Not exactly a pedigree that would attract a high-born woman, or most women, for that matter. With this woman, he'd instantly been attracted. Glynis was striking with her fair complexion, red hair, and the clearest green eyes he'd ever seen. One of the forward guards held up a fist, and everyone brought their steeds to a stop and went silent. Caelan leaned down to the carriage window. "Be silent. There is a party ahead, and we are ensuring they are not a danger." The 3 sets of eyes locked to him, but the only ones he noticed were the green ones. "'Tis a pair of peddlers," a guard called out. "No threat." Overhearing the guard, his stepmother's eyes widened as she looked to the other women. She held out her hands, making a motion for him to move. "Ask the peddlers to stop at once," she ordered. When he stared at her, she pointed to the carriage door. "Help us out, son." "We cannot linger," Caelan said, frowning toward the guard who galloped away to speak to the pedlars. "As it is, stepmother, we will be hard-pressed to arrive before nightfall." Promptly ignoring him, the women climbed out of the carriage and hurried in the direction of the waiting pedlars. Excited at their good fortune, the sellers greeted the women with great enthusiasm. Caelan motioned to a guard. "Remain with the carriage. The rest of you, surround the pedlars and ensure no one else is about." As the 8 men did as they were told, he urged his mount ahead in order to patrol the area. It was on this same route that Stuart and Artair had been attacked just months earlier. Unlike that day, the sky was clear, and it was easy to see there were no threats. As of late, South Uist had become more dangerous. People who travelled through the Isle were often men escaping persecution from mainland Scotland for crimes. Not only that, but with the late Laird's passing, things changed. Darach ensured laws were enforced to protect the clanspeople. There were those who were angry that they had lost control and the ability to gain from others' misfortune. A guard returned from scouting ahead and gave him a curious look. "Why did you stop?" Caelan shrugged. "We came upon pedlars, and the women demanded to shop for trinkets." The man let out a bark of laughter. "Aye, women do love to acquire what they can from the travelling tempters." "That is a good name for them," Caelan replied, scanning the area. "Anything of note?" The scout shook his head. "There is a group camped up ahead. 4 in total, 2 men and 2 women. They are headed to the west shore and are not in any hurry. Actually seem to be enjoying themselves." "My stepmother will want to stop and speak to them," Caelan said, looking up at the sky. "At this rate, we will not arrive until morning." True to form, Lady Mariel insisted they stop upon spotting the people, who were now surrounding a small fire. Caelan argued that it was growing dark and they would not arrive until well after dark. However, she insisted. "My aunt, like my mother, has always had a heart for people," Glynis said, standing next to him as he watched over his stepmother. "You should be proud of her, not perturbed." Blowing out an annoyed breath, he glanced down at her. "You seem to find it easy to make presumptions about my person." "You look rather annoyed at her stopping to ensure the people are well." "Those people are not in harm's way. Therefore, the fact that we are losing daylight and must travel in the dark, which makes it dangerous for the horses, does annoy me." "Here she comes now," Glynis said, walking toward his stepmother, who smiled. "I tried to convince them to travel with us, to keep from any harm, but they insisted they wanted to remain there, since it will be dark soon." Caelan gave his stepmother a droll look. "Because, stepmother, travelling in the dark is dangerous." When she came closer and cupped his jaw with her hand, his heart melted. "I am not afraid, because ye are the bravest warrior I know, and will keep us all safe." At the words, Glynis grinned at him, eyes twinkling with mirth. Caelan narrowed his, but decided it was best not to say anything further. His English appearance had lulled many an attacker to thinking him easy prey. However, those who knew him would think twice before confronting him. With sword in hand and temper loosed, he became someone else, a berserker of sorts. In battle, he rarely was injured, nor did he ever lose. He was without compare when the hot temper just beneath the surface erupted. Few who battled him lived to talk about it. His stepmother looked up at the sky. "Do you think we should set up camp as well?" "Aye, it is best that we do. Horses can hurt themselves travelling in the dark." Before long, they had a bonfire lit and a makeshift shelter for the women. Fish were caught in a nearby stream, and the meal was shared with the other travellers, who seemed happy to have companions who would keep dangers at bay. "Where exactly are you headed?" Caelan asked one of the men, who introduced himself as Luke. "To the shore, to find a village to settle at," he replied, eyeing the bonfire. "I hope to find work and a home for my wife." "My family owns the lands from here to the northern shore. There is a village there that is growing. It is called Caelan Days. You may wish to settle there." Caelan admired the man, who seemed hopeful that he could provide his wife with a better life. He couldn't help but wonder what it would be like to begin again, without work, coin, or food. "Reach out to my cousin. His name is Dougal Ross, and he is the village constable. He will help you find shelter and work." The man gave him a grateful look. "We are very fortunate to have met you on the way to our new life." Caelan did not ask the man why he and his companions were travelling. It was obvious they were poor and without resources. At the same time, Luke seemed proud and eager to find work. He had no doubt the man and his companions would do well in Caelan Days. Instead of sleeping, he took first watch and, along with 2 guards, patrolled while the others slept. Caelan wasn't keen to spend a night outdoors and then another day in the same clothes. Since very young, unless at battle, which he dressed appropriately for, he changed clothes daily after washing up. They planned to remain with Stuart and Cat a fortnight, so he'd brought enough clothes to change daily, with only needing a few things washed. Thankfully, since there was a creek not too far from where they camped, he could bathe and change at dawn. At the thought, he looked up to the star-filled sky. The moon was bright, giving plenty of light. Although the weather was quite cold, thankfully there were no clouds in the sky. The last thing they needed was to travel through a storm. As soon as the first rays of daylight peaked, Caelan got up and grabbed clothes from the small trunk he'd packed. He hurried to the creek, not looking forward to the frigid water, but the sooner he got it over with, the better. After looking to ensure the women were not up, he undressed and dove into the water. The coldness of it took his breath, and he gasped before diving back in. After running soap over his body, he submerged in the water and jumped back up, his teeth chattering as he waded to the shoreline. When he turned to where he'd left his clothes, Glynis appeared through the trees. She yawned and stretched her arms over her head. Oblivious to his presence, she walked to the edge of the water and lowered to crouch near the water's edge. Caelan was shivering and did not have the patience to wait for the woman to wash her face or whatever it was she was doing. "Do you mind turning your back? I need to dress." Caelan knew he sounded irritated, but he didn't care. When she turned to him, he dropped both hands to cover his sex. Sure, his lips were turning blue from the cold. He became more annoyed when, instead of turning away, she stared at him, mouth agape. "Why are you bathing? The water is much too cold." "If you do not turn, I will not care what you see," he snapped with little effect as the shivering made his voice quiver. "Oh, sorry." Glynis turned around and looked up at the trees. "Did you sleep well?" Struggling to put his tunic on, he grunted in response. Once it was on, the warmth of the thick fabric began to seep in, making it easier to pull on his breeches. He sat down to pull on his socks and boots, and then tied a thick leather belt around his waist. Once that was done, he lifted his scabbard and sword. I need to wash my face and return to help my aunt, Glynis said, standing in the same spot. Without a response, Caelan walked away. The woman annoyed him. He'd taken an instant dislike to Glynis. Just her mere presence made him cross. Perhaps he was set in his ways, preferring to spend time with those he knew. Yes, he enjoyed female company, here and there, but only for short moments. This one, although pretty, rubbed him the wrong way with her way of speaking without thought. At his home, most days after last meal, he and Beatrice, Duncan's wife, often spent time in the parlour, reading or playing a game. She entertained him with her anecdotes, and many times they would laugh about the silliest things. If he could meet someone like Beatrice, he could see himself settling down. Though maybe not. Even though he enjoyed her company, it was nice when Beatrice went to seek her husband, leaving Caelan to his own company and thoughts. "Caelan," his stepmother approached. "Have you seen Glynis?" He nodded. "She is by the creek." "Alone?" "She is not that far, just there." He pointed in the direction where he'd left Glynis. His stepmother gave him a curious look. "You do not care for her. Why?" He shrugged. "Just do not. No reason, really." "I am sure once we get to your brother's, ye will not have to spend time with her daily." His stepmother frowned. "Nonetheless, she is under our care, and it is your responsibility to ensure her safety." Escorting his stepmother to the creek, he searched the shoreline for Glynis. She was not where he'd left her. "She could be seeking privacy to relieve herself," he said when his stepmother became frantic. "Glynis!" Lady Mhairi called out. "Where are you, dear?" There was a splash, and Glynis popped out of the water just a few yards away. She hurried from the water and, bare as a bairn, rushed to her clothes. At hearing his stepmother call her name, Glynis stopped and turned to them, giving him a view of her entire front side. Caelan coughed to hide a bark of laughter. "Ah!" She grabbed a skirt or something and held it up, covering herself. "Do not just stand there. Ensure no one comes," his stepmother scolded. The woman was truly an annoyance. He glared at his stepmother, who motioned for him to turn his back. Caelan turned and stood, with feet apart and arms crossed, while he assumed his stepmother helped Glynis dress quickly. "What are you thinking, bathing in such cold water?" he called out. There was no reply. He pressed his lips together at how Glynis had dashed from the water, sputtering and stumbling to her clothing, her bare, wet body glistening. She was exquisite, if he were to be honest. Small waist, round hips and large breasts. The type of body a man could become lost in. "Caelan," his stepmother tapped his shoulder. "Let us get back to camp and see about getting on the road." Upon reaching the outskirts of Eilon Days, Stuart's lands, they separated from the travellers, each group going their separate ways. Caelan reminded Luke to ask for his cousin, Dougal Ross, before their group headed down toward the seashore, as his party headed up the incline to where Stuart and his wife lived. The lands surrounding Stuart and Kat's large stone house were beautiful. There were cattle and sheep grazing on the lush green hillside, and they passed pens and corrals filled with more livestock as they neared the house. Goats watched them with unblinking eyes, and several chickens scurried out of the way, clucking in displeasure at their apparent rudeness. Stuart and Kat emerged from the house with expectant looks. Caelan dismounted and walked to his brother, who hugged him tightly and pounded his back in greeting. "Your visit is most opportune," Stuart said. It seems someone we did not ever wish to see again has reared his head near here. Caelan narrowed his eyes. Cairn McInerney. Aye. His blood ran cold. Then we must kill him. Chapter 2. Glynis immediately fell in love with Cat Ross. The pretty woman was shy, but had a strength about her that radiated. Like Glynis and her mother back in Barra, Cat took part in every aspect of maintaining the large home. Just after they arrived, Cat, along with 2 servant women, who she introduced as Maisie and Grace, served them a delicious meal. Cat's companion, Cora, helped as well. After the meal, Cora poured hot cider and placed a tray of delicious tarts for the women to enjoy as they settled into chairs in front of a cheery fire. The front room of the house was spacious and spotless. Glynis couldn't help but admire the simple but well-made furniture. She itched to explore the rest of the house and get ideas for when she too had her own home one day. "You must drink the cider to ensure to keep warm," her aunt said in a chastising tone. She then looked to Cat. "She bathed in the creek this morning. The water had to be ice cold." Cat's eyes widened. "I cannot stand cold water. You should have waited and had a hot bath here." "It was impulsive. I saw Caelan bathing and thought perhaps I should also." Glynis stopped talking when she realised what she'd said. "I did not actually see him bathe. Oh, my." She covered her burning cheeks with both hands. Cat and her aunt laughed. "What exactly did you see?" Cat asked, her eyes bright with glee. Her aunt gave her a pointed look. "Caelan definitely saw you bare as a bairn getting out of the creek." Her eyes rounded. "No." "Aye," her aunt said. "So you both had an interesting start to the day, seeing each other naked." When the women laughed, her cheeks hot with mortification, Glynis had to join in. She'd not thought he'd seen her, but then again, she'd been in such a hurry to get out of the water, it only made sense. Just then, Caelan walked in. At seeing him, both Cat and her aunt burst into loud laughter. "What is so humorous?" Her aunt smiled at him. "We are telling Cat and Cora about the bathing episodes this morning." He narrowed his eyes at Glynis, who pretended not to notice. "The cold does affect certain things." After chuckling at his discomfort, his stepmother wiped tears from the corners of her eyes with a handkerchief. "It is quite funny. I am sorry that ye both are embarrassed." "What exactly was affected?" Cat asked, giving him an innocent look that did not fool anyone for an instant, especially when the corners of her lips quivered. "I came to inform you, stepmother," he began, ignoring Cat's question, "that I and the guards are going to ride about the area. We will be gone most of the day." Cat looked to him again. "Is Stuart not going?" "Only to the village. He has business to conduct." Glynis could not help but notice that he dressed differently here. He looked every inch a Scot, wearing a thick woven tunic, leather boots and wool breeches. In his hand he held a fur-lined cloak that would keep him warm against the cold wind. "Be with care," Lady Mariel told him, her cheeks still pink from laughing. Just before turning, he slid a glance toward her. Glynis wasn't sure what to read in his gaze, but he certainly seemed to not care for her in the least. When he'd gone out of earshot, she grimaced. "He does not like me." "Why would you say that?" Cat asked. "He keeps stealing glances at you." "Probably to ensure I keep a distance," Glynis replied. I said an impulsive thing at first meeting him and set the wrong tone. Lady Mariel lifted her cup and...
Sample complete. Ready to continue?